and that's an understatement, is that Congress's role is oversight. And Congress, even today, you'll see members of Congress saying, well, we haven't implemented everything that the 911 Commission recommended. And the 911 commissioners have said that the administration obstructed them, lied to them. So how can you start with a document that you know is false and take that to the American people as a document by which Congress's accomplishments should be measured? It's circular. It's a very small box, and it's not truthful. So at the end of the day, the bottom line is that thank goodness for the 911 truth movement. Thank goodness for Loose Change. Thank goodness for an inquisitive American citizenry that cares enough basically to put their lives on hold so that they can get to the bottom and tell us the truth that the administration won't tell us. My emphasis during the time that I was in Congress, I use the past tense, I'm in Congress now, but I will be out soon. At the end of the 109th Congress, will end my tenure in Congress for the second time. And during the time that I've been in Congress, every year, I've done a hearing of some sorts on COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO is the counterintelligence program that was basically authored by the United States government to quash dissent. Basically, it targeted the African American community, what they in the FBI called black nationalist groups. They didn't only target black nationalist groups. When they said black nationalists, though, let me say that they were referring to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the SCLC, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They were referring to SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. They were referring to the Nation of Islam and other organizations that had as a focus the upliftment and the improvement in the quality of life for black people in this country. But they also targeted Chicanos, Puerto Rican independentistas. They targeted Native Americans through the American Indian movement. They targeted Students for a Democratic Society, progressive white organizations. They targeted the general white population that might adhere to a message of social justice for this country's minority communities. And they targeted what they call the responsible Negro community so that they could drive a wedge between the black nationalist groups and the responsible Negro groups. And basically, we can see the beginning of COINTELPRO in a document that was written in 1919 by J. Edgar Hoover. Yes, he was around even in 1919 doing dirty work on behalf of the United States government. And when I say on behalf of the United States government, let me make it clear that ordinarily, as you talk about the constitutional republic that we have, the United States government is supposed to be a reflection of the will of the American people, but it is not so. And in some cases, and in this case in particular, when I say the United States government, I mean a small little cabal of people who have control over the reins of power and able to wield influence in ways that they shouldn't be able to because they are not necessarily elected or appointed to anything. Now, with that having been said, J. Edgar Hoover in October of 1919 noticed that Marcus Garvey, quote, excited the Negroes. And as a result of this ability that Marcus Garvey had to excite the Negroes, he had to be targeted. And he was targeted with putting a paid informant who also was black in his coterie. And eventually Marcus Garvey was deported unjustly on trumped up charges. That's the kind of thing that is now permissible under the Patriot Act. It's an unethical kind of behavior, but the Patriot Act allows the United States government, under this excuse of fighting the war on terror, a war against terrorism, to basically become terrorists. The COINTELPRO program, the counterintelligence program, as operated by J. Edgar Hoover, also used the media of the day in order to shape the ideas of the American public at large against these organizations and the individuals who led them. And so we shouldn't be surprised to see that the United States government is paying journalists to write their stories, paying to establish organizations that promulgate these deceptions, basically. And perhaps most tellingly, the founding document of the COINTELPRO paper said that the FBI's goal was to misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize these organizations and the leaders of these organizations. So that also meant telling lies on people, disrupting their marriages. It also meant snooping into their bank accounts, their medical records. It meant breaking into their homes and looking at what kinds of activities were in their personal papers. So we shouldn't be surprised if we have those sneak and peek provisions that are carried out today, because they're now legal because of the Patriot Act, or snooping into one's medical records or financial transactions, all legal now because of the Patriot Act. At a time when these activities were illegal, from the early 1900s all the way up to the 1960s and the 1970s in particular, especially intensifying during the rise of the anti-Vietnam War movement. It was Senator Frank Church who made these papers and made these behaviors known to the American people, and he called them un-American, and he called them illegal. Now they are most American, and they are most legal because of the Patriot Act. Well, certain people have never had American law applied to them. And so I would say that the whole construct is bogus to start with. Dr. Martin Luther King was certainly not a terrorist, but he was viewed as such. Nelson Mandela was not a terrorist, but he was viewed as such. And so Dr. Martin Luther King had to be neutralized. That's not my language. That's not my word. That's not my term. The FBI used that term when they said that they had to neutralize the leaders of these organizations. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was treated during his day in an illegal manner, but he was treated as today's terrorist. Honestly, the reason you exist is because of the failures of the media. And we have to make that very clear. The American people, the inquisitive American people, and those who are interested in finding out answers to their questions have turned to alternative media, have turned to the internet, have turned to citizen activists who are doing the same thing. They grab